What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Dispatch Season 2. This time, though, I want to take a look at some potential options they have, give some pitches. Of course, I want to hear from you guys in the comments. What do you think they should do for Season 2? But I do also want to throw in, I got to be a little negative here, and not necessarily negative to like, suddenly they can't do a Season 2, but I do think there is one pretty big problem, a pretty big elephant in the room, I think, when it comes to Season 2. Let's start there. Let's start with the negative. We'll get that out of the way because I think actually that's going to organically lead us to what they should do instead. To me, the issue is redoing it with Robert and company. Now, okay, I'll expand on that, but I love Robert so much. I love Invisigal and Blonde Blazer, and it's such an incredible cast. It's really a cast I think got better each time. There's definitely standouts. I think there's some characters that are better than others, but it is one of the better casts I think you're going to find in a game, in an episodic game, but just in a game really this entire year. I think it's going to be very hard to come back with the entire cast. And so, okay, why? I really think it actually comes down to choices. I think this is a problem that choice-based games have had really their entire life. You know, I think to Life is Strange with making the ultimate decision at the end of Life is Strange 1, right, or episode 5, and why, even though I always wanted Max to come back, and technically we did get Max to come back, that would have been such a difficult thing to do because the game and the developer has to pick an ending for you. It's why doing something, say, 5 days after Mass Effect 3 would be very difficult, right? Because you have to pick one of those three endings. And you think about the episodic games we've gotten with Wolf Among Us. We've never gotten Wolf Among Us 2, at least not yet. Tales in the Borderlands. We got Gearbox's new Tales in the Borderlands that was utterly atrocious, okay? But Tales was a one and done. Minecraft, I would say, was one that did it decently well, but there was nothing, I would say, of major impact that you had to choose. Okay, so where am I going with this? Well, you think about choice-based games, and you think about the resources available. And what I am trying to kind of convey is, you know, depending on the choice you make at the end of Season 1, I think it'd be very difficult to pick up there and say, okay, let's do Season 2. And it's actually why I would prefer that Robert and company are maybe at best on the sidelines in a Season 2. Now, I kind of have two paths in my head of how I want them to go, but I think it's as simple as that. And I guess what I really mean is, okay, you pick Blonde Blazer. Well, you're going to have to say you pick Blonde Blazer, okay? So going into Season 2, they would have to make a game that would basically be two different games. Does that make sense? If I picked Invisigal and you picked Blonde Blazer, and we really want their relationship to mean something, right? We turn off our TV, we turn off our console, we turn off our PC. We have headcanon for where Robert and Invisigal are going. Robert and Blonde Blazer, the Z Team. We have in our head where that kind of journey will take us. If you make a second game, you got to choose things for us because factually, you're not going to be able to make two different versions of a game, right? You can't pick up Season 2, say it comes out tomorrow, and it takes place a day after Season 1. It would be incredibly difficult to pick that up and say, okay, so all of you that picked Invisigal, here's a 10-hour another game where we're going to take it, and there's going to be a general story that would apply to both, but Invisigal's your gal, or Blonde Blazer's your gal. I feel it's next to impossible. And I also feel like it's just not how it happens. You know what really happens is I feel like there's kind of convenient, like, overarching things that happen. And I will say, okay, in terms of my idea, one idea I had is simply make us be another dispatcher. Now, again, this is an issue because I know we love the Z Team, Invisigal, Blonde Blazer, all them. An idea that popped into my head almost immediately was the game's called Dispatch, okay? And I know Aaron Paul wants to come back. You know, Laura Bailey is always available. Really, the entire cast, most of that cast is Critical Role, right? So they're available, I feel like, whenever they really feel like it. But if you do Season 2, I like the idea of putting us as another dispatcher, and maybe Robert has risen up the ranks, and you're almost working along with him. And that way you can have the Z Team kind of organically come in and out, in and out, in and out, while you're building your own new one. You can have Blonde Blazer show up as a cameo. You can have Invisigal show up as a cameo. And I like that because to me that keeps the canon going. Okay, because in that fictional scenario that I'm thinking of, right, you would choose at the beginning of Season 2. Okay, you would choose. Now, you're not playing as Robert. Just follow with me, in this case. You don't play as Robert, but the game asks you, okay, how did you end season 1? Did you end up with Blonde Blazer, Invisigal, or was Invisigal kind of the anti-hero? She leaves and she's kind of in her own little camp. Pick one of those 3 endings, right? And then that way, the game is really separate. The game story, Shroud wouldn't be involved, let's say, right? You'd really be doing your own game, but you could have members of the Z team whenever you want come in and out. You can be working literally next to Robert. Heck, he can be a mentor. Maybe you're a new dispatcher and he's somebody that's kind of mentoring you, even in the same facility. Maybe you could do it somewhere else. You don't have to make it be in LA, and that's fine too. But you could have it where, he's part of the game. Yeah, Blonde Blazer and Invisigal are part of the game. And that way, at least to me, and that really is the center of it. To me, that's the center, is the 2 girls, because, where they go as a relationship, and I guess where he takes the Z team, I really feel like that should almost be up to us. And it is up to us at the end of the game, generally, And so to rob us of that, I feel like, and do a season 2 and say, okay, look, we have to tell a general story, because you know what ends up happening there, right? And we kind of saw it with Life is Strange, which, for as much flack as that game got, it was always going to run into that problem. Any game will run into that problem. So here's what I'm pitching in this worst-case scenario. Oftentimes, a game like this will look to do something to get you out of a situation that you just had in Season 1. So an easy way of doing it for Season 2 is you broke up. So if you picked Invisigal at the end of Season 1 and say, okay, you're back as Robert, everything's cool, we're picking up 2 weeks later, right? A month later. You broke up. Because why would you break up? Well, again, in terms of canon and headcanon and all that stuff, we probably wouldn't want that to happen. But in terms of the game, it would be an easy way to reset things. What's the point of doing something like that, right? In saying, hey, well, we're going to try to pick like a loose outcome from the end of Season 1. It's to reset. It's to reset, because then you have the opportunity to tell one story. And I get that. And I think that's kind of where hopefully I'm able to convey that, because I do understand as game devs, you're making a 10-hour game. And look, because at this point, you've gone down a path so deep. I think that's also what I'm trying to say. And I think there's an easier way of saying it, is Season 1 wraps up actually really nice. And it kind of wrapped up in a way as I predicted. I didn't predict all of it right, but the idea of you go back to work on the following Monday or Tuesday. I think he makes a joke with Blonde Blazer, right, where he's like, well, we're off on Monday, right? And she kind of laughs. And it's like that kind of was what I predicted was the ending is, yeah, you resolve it, and, technically Mecha Man is a thing and all that jazz, but, like, you're going to go back to work, and that relationship with who you pick is going to continue on, and who knows what could happen to it, but of course, again, I feel like judging from Life is Strange, you probably don't want to break them up immediately. I just don't think that's a good idea with either of these 2 girls. And then also, you're just going back and you're continuing on. Now, yeah, continuing on means you could pick it up right from there, because it's like, all right, well, now continue to build the lore, continue to build these characters. But I feel like the decisions have been definitive, and now it'd be very difficult to say, all right, well, we're going to kind of take like a loose, we're almost going to make like a 4th ending to Dispatch to make sure that we can actually make a Season 2. So for me, the prime things that I would do, I saw one theory that talked about perhaps Robert moving to somewhere else. And man, that one's a tough one. Okay, because I think it's actually pretty close to what I'm pitching. Because if you want to keep Robert, say, as the main character, what would you probably do? You probably would want a new team. And again, I understand, like, actually part of the love of this game is the love of the characters and their bond. But in a way of, I think, kind of resetting the table would be for him to move somewhere, or maybe to get swapped up. Maybe he rises up the ranks so much that they say, okay, you're kind of known as this guy who takes these rejects and transform them, right? Like that's literally his MO. Now you could do that in a different, state. You could do that in the same office, just with a new Z team. The only issue I'd have there is you would have found a way to keep Robert, so that's a plus, right? And to keep the Mecha Man, and to keep it maybe in the same general location. So like all those things are pluses, but you're swapping out a team for a team, which you might have to do no matter what. And then again, I think you'd really would have to pick the two girls, and I think that would just be a really interesting decision, that they would have to make. I feel, even though we love these characters, because I'm almost wrestling in it myself, like even pitching the idea, right, that a season 2 like wouldn't star Robert. I feel like he's an epic character. He's a really, and I talked about that with Aaron Paul, I believe after episodes 1 and 2, where just his voice acting and the way he talks, like it's a little bit different. It's not something that every voice actor does, but you really fall for Robert immediately, and he's a phenomenal character. And do I want to see more? I do. But also, there's a part of me, and maybe this is something, as I've gotten older, I've had to really, examine. There's also a part where it's like, well, we walked through just now kind of this masterpiece, and I think it's sometimes okay to say, well, leave it. Now, it's not to say leave everything behind, and that's kind of where I'm at. The idea of give me Dispatch Season 2, you can't possibly stop there. Really, these last couple episodes is where I've, really transformed, where it's like, all right, I'm moving away from Robert and all of them and moving to a different group. That hurts, but why does it hurt? And I think this is actually kind of important to walk through. Why would it, hurt me even to say, like, oh, it would just give us a new team? It's because we love that old team so much, but isn't that part of the reason why you almost would want to move past it, right? Because continuing it, you're going to have to make decisions for us. You might ruin a good thing, or you just, it might be just too samey. Whereas I feel what I pitched in the beginning, right? New person as a leader, as a dispatcher. Now, you probably would have to do that. You'd have to be the dispatcher because that's what the game is. I was thinking in my head actually earlier today, what if you played as one of the, like the say it's a Z team or a new Z team. What if you played as one of that, like the villains? And I think that could be interesting. You'd have to probably come up with new gameplay kind of gimmicks, mechanics, because, as a dispatcher, I think you'd have a lot of, free space to do what you want in that gameplay department. But I don't know, it's called Dispatch, right? So if you do Dispatch Season 2, what is Dispatch? Well, it's a game where you play, as a dispatcher, and you're sending out these group of heroes, or in this case, kind of villains turned heroes, and it's the bonding of these characters, right? That's what makes the game the game. And that's the center. It's not called the Robert game. It's not called Invisigal and Blonde Blazer. It's called Dispatch. So I feel like if you do another game, and you kind of, not necessarily anthology, because you could keep it in LA, you could put it somewhere else, I don't really care. Well, actually, I probably would keep it in LA, to be honest, because then you could kind of keep everything together. You can have mentions of Shroud. You could have returning villains. I mean, like the bad guys, in the game. You could have all of that. You could have, again, you could have a Malevolent come in every episode or two. You can have the rotation of the Z team members be cameos. You could have Blonde Blazer still kind of being in charge if you wanted, right? And then you could throw in scenes where her and Robert are together if that was the choice that you told the game you wanted in, say, the beginning of episode 1 of season 2. Or if it's Invisigal, okay, well, Robert's there. He's sitting to your left in the office, and he's got his team, and he's dating Invisigal. You see him at the office sometimes. I feel like that, to me, that's a great way of almost testing them too, because it's like, all right, do it again. You prove that you could you have stellar writing, right? The art and stuff is amazing. It's just, the game is just incredible, right? But like the writing is so good. You made so many lovable characters, and you made this journey with all of them kind of coming together. Can you do it again? That's number one. Now, technically, they're going to have the Critical Role game to try, next. But can you do it again? And then you can also kind of lean sometimes on the members of the first game if you wanted to. Honestly, you could even have a thing where, like, some of them are part of your team. Like The Office, and they did the paper or whatever the TV show was, and they had everybody, like, new, right? But then they had Oscar that was there. Now, I'm not necessarily saying, like, replicate that scenario, because I don't think that pleased everybody, but the idea that you could pick a couple Z team members to just be part of the base cast. So pick your favorite 2 or 3, bring them over, have some new people. So you got some established characters and some new characters. And then Robert, Blonde Blazer, Chase, and Invisigal. Those are your 4 kind of reoccurring. They're around. They could be side characters. They could have kind of meaty roles to play, but they're kind of separate and they're kind of established so that, again, basically it's just the decisions are not made for you. That would be how I would do it. I do like the idea of Robert kind of trying it again, like a new Z team. I mean, that's kind of what I'm pitching as well, is basically do it again, newsy team. Keep the idea of the dispatch. Keep the idea of these rejects turned heroes that kind of have to bond over something, right? They have this journey together. Keep that, but maybe you would have to move off of Robert in order to do it. But that would kind of be keeping the heart of Dispatch alive. So hopefully you guys at least understand what I was going for, even if you don't agree. Maybe I'm putting too much stock into the choices between Invisigal and Blonde Blazer. I mean, I've seen interviews where they talked about like cut scenes, and if they knew that people were going to be so interested in the game, they actually would have had more love interest. Now, I don't know how that would have played because the game was always going to one of two options. So it's like if you had 5 options, the ending I feel like would just become too big and kind of too messy. So I don't know, maybe the romance doesn't mean a lot, but see, again, like that's probably a situation where if you do a season 2 and you bring everybody back, there's going to be a breakup, they're not actually going to be together, or the romance, one of two things can happen, okay? They're going to break them up in order to make it work, or the relationship's not going to be as powerful as you would want it to be, right? Like if you want them to be boyfriend, girlfriend, they're going through, in order to make the game work, because you're not going to make 10 hours of like deep things between Robert and Blonde Blazer, and then also Robert and Invisigal. It's too many scenes. It's too much to do it twice over. It's just not how these games work. It's never been, and it never will be. In which case, then you have to have less of them. And that's really all it is. You have less kind of romantic scenes between the two, but then it's like they're not even necessarily dating. Really, you don't really feel that the ending of season 1, like, is it really a carryover? It might not feel like that. So that's just in my head. That's kind of what I'm just afraid, that you would have to cut certain corners. You'd have to make certain decisions just so the game would work. And it's like, to me, I think it's such a perfect kind of, at least that part, like choosing one of the two, they're both kind of perfect in the way that it worked out. And I kind of want it to remain perfect. And in order for it to remain perfect, you might have to leave it. You might have to literally just like let us do it in our heads and let the lore of the game just go and play somebody else in the same game. You can have in the same universe, characters kind of coming in and out, but like let that story go because it was a masterpiece, and let it kind of continue without necessarily having to pick it up. I understand maybe how that would be, but I feel like if you pick it up, you're going to have to make certain decisions that might, start to infringe upon it, and I don't want that. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.